Hello everyone, this is probably going to be the last video other than the van tour that I do for this crafter van conversion, and it covers something that I've been putting off doing for, well, I've had this van for nearly 4 years now, or it will be 4 years in October. I always knew that I'd have to do the Cambelt. Absolutely nothing on YouTube at all that really gives me any info on how to do it. It's one of these things where if you do a search you find very little information, how-tos, etc, etc. There was a few videos in Russian, but they weren't easy to follow, easy to understand. So I thought I'd have a go, do a Cambelt, and just make a video showing the oddities that I found that perhaps others hadn't mentioned or I couldn't understand in the translations of the videos I'd watched. So I hope you find this useful if you're planning to do a Cambelt on a 2.5 litre 5-cylinder VW crafter ever. There may be some bits in here that help you. Good morning everyone. This is a 2.5 litre 5-cylinder 2011 Volkswagen crafter. I bought this van October 2018. I've been slowly converting it into a camper van, and it's now almost 4 years later. I've never driven it. I have no service history beyond about 2016 when Volkswagen stopped maintaining it under warranty. This was originally an ambulance operated by DHL, and I'm not sure it ever had the Cambelt changed. There's absolutely nothing on YouTube in English about 5-cylinder crafter Cambelts. So I thought, whilst having a go at changing it, I'd make a video. Now this van has air conditioning, so a couple of tricks of getting the radiator out by cutting some slots in the plastic housing won't work. I had the aircon degassed yesterday by a mobile fitter. The vehicle's not MOT'd, so I can't take it in to get it the Cambelt changed or anything like that, and I don't want to drive it very far, because I have no idea how long the Cambelt when it was last changed. I stripped down the front. I'm not going to show a video of how to take a bumper off or how to take headlights out because it's just screws and common sense. This particular van has got an Urbaspatcher additional air conditioning unit above the cab for the saloon, hence the electric fan on the left is an add-on. The standard air conditioning fan is that one on the right, and that entire unit comes off with 4 torque screws, and I've also undone the 2 Jubilee clips for the power steering cooler to get that out of the way. The power steering fluid is quite black. I'm going to get it changed, or I'm going to change it all as part of this exercise. Basically, in order to get at the Cambelt, you've either got to get the radiator out of the way or take this entire slam panel off. And this thing is held on by top bolt, 2 bolts there, 45 torque screw in the side there, so a total of 4 bolts on each side. But in order to get it off, obviously you need to disconnect cables. So I've taken off the cables on the right hand side and the cable to the horn and a couple of other cables on the left hand side, and disconnect all the pipe work to the radiators and the air conditioning unit. As I said, I had it degassed yesterday. The intercooler can actually be removed. There's a bolt there, and there's another one on the other side, but the one on the other side is going to be a bit of a pig to get at because it's actually obstructed by the receiver drive for the air conditioning unit. So I'm probably going to leave the intercooler in place and drop the whole unit out. Once I've got this out, then I've got good access to the front of the van. Some of the videos do show people managing to get the radiator shroud out of the way, get a torque screw down to free off the viscous fan, and then they can wiggle the radiator out from the back without taking this slam panel off. Because of this air conditioning condenser here and the fact it's actually clipped in behind the plastic, I've got to actually take the entire front off. And frankly, because it's only time, it's not costing me any money, it's just time, I might as well take it all off. It also means I can clean up the vehicle a bit. There's some oil leaks and, well, muck basically. I'm not sure where it's leaks, but there's muck and I just want to clean things up. We're already given the fittings there. He says, does it zoom in? Zoom, 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 zoom. There. They're all mucky and smutty with soots. There, you can just see the thread of the bolt that holds the one of the pipes for the air conditioning unit in place, the air conditioning condenser rather. The rubber pipes, the 2 rubber hoses behind there, they're very, very short. I was hoping maybe I could swing this entire unit out and almost hinge it on that top bolt up there. But the pipes, I think the rubber tubes just won't bend enough. So the only logical thing is take it out. Good thing too, really, because when I had it degassed, I say this vehicle's been here for nearly 4 years, no idea of its history. There was 680 grams of gas in it, and I reckon at least a kilogram, maybe 1100 grams of gas should be in this system because of the extra air conditioning unit in the top of the van. So there's the slam panel removed, and as you can see I've taken the radiator out. The radiator itself hooks into the two lugs there, one on either side, and the catches locate through these holes here. Let's just zoom in. You can see those little lugs. So there are clips on the radiator that pop through these holes, same on the other side. And the radiator itself, very similar to the Sprinter radiator. You flip it over, then just there is a drain tap. These drain taps seem to confuse people at times. The way they work, it's not just a case of turning it like that and expecting it to work. There's a hose on there. You actually have to pop it up. That's when it's open, when it's just popped up. Not completely removed, you can take it right out, but that's open, not as some people think like that. It actually needs to be pulled out for the grommet to actually come past where the spigot is. Very useful for draining them down. The bottom hose, it's easier to disconnect it at the metal pipe that it connects to, and then you can obviously take it off over there later on if you want to, but it's actually easier to disconnect it there. Now, the air conditioning condenser clips in at the bottom in that little lug there, and then there's compressible clips at the top here. Focus. I'll turn the radiator around, that'll be easier. These little clips here, the tabs, there, that just needs to be pressed down slightly and the entire condenser unclips. And I've taken all this apart, didn't need to, zoom out, I didn't need to take all this apart, but I'm just dangling, the condenser's actually dangling on the side of that scaffold frame over there, just to see if there's any oil actually in the receiver dryer or the actual condenser itself, because that total amount of oil that drains out of there now, plus what the guy took out of it yesterday, is what we need to put back in. You really don't want to put more oil back in than necessary. Right, so that's the slam panel removed, radiator unclipped, condenser unclipped over there. I'm just going to have a look at my pot. There's absolutely sod oil come out of it. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I shall clip it all back together in a minute, stick it back in here, and put this to one side. Right, next part of the job. I've just taken off the viscous fan. The thing was stupidly tight. It's probably been done up previously with impact. It's supposed to be done up to 40 Newton meters. I've actually just sheared off an 8mm bit in my impact driver trying to get it off. And I didn't expect that. So I had to resort to plan B, which was a standard Allen key and an extending bar. But what you do need is a do-it-yourself holder. That thing. You need something with a couple of pins. They're M6 bolts, fit perfectly. But you need something with a couple of pins that will lock into... I've lost the pulley. There's the pulley. You can see around the edge of the pulley there are 3 holes. Around there. And that simply goes in each hole. It gives you something to actually hold on to while you're sticking a dirty great Tommy bar or whatever it is on this. The other thing to bear in mind is that bolt is 100% definitely standard thread. You unscrew it anti-clockwise and you do it up clockwise. I did think when it wouldn't come undone with the impact, oops, maybe it's a reverse thread, but it isn't. You also need to use the hold down device to actually undo these 3 bolts you can see around this pulley, because the pulley has to come off before the timing cover can be removed, but I shall be playing with that in a moment. So they're the salient points that I've always wondered about, because people don't say in some of these videos, you know, how they got things apart. You see them magically just undoing it. You think, well, that was clear, that came undone easily. In the real world, things are tight. So that's what you need. Bit of do-it-yourself bar. I think the bolts, the screws rather, I've used they're about 20mm deep. These they're only short, you don't need anything massively long. Job done so far. So that's all that part pulled to pieces. The engine actually runs clockwise when looking at it from this direction. And if you follow the pulley round, you'll see that the belt goes up to the two left-hand pulleys, and the end result is that the viscous fan runs anti-clockwise in relation to the crankshaft. And if you look at the viscous fan, I mentioned this in my video about the Sprinter, and I actually did the front dress on that. But if you look at the viscous fan, you can see the way the fan blades are pointing in order to pull air through the radiator and blow it over the engine means this particular fan has to rotate anti-clockwise. And because of the way the pulleys are laid out, it's pretty obvious that the engine turns over in a clockwise direction. Some of the videos I've seen and some of the threads I've read have suggested that when you're setting up the cam belt you turn the engine over anti-clockwise, and I thought, well, why are you doing that? But I'll cover that later on. It's not turn the engine over anti-clockwise, it's just take up the slack in the belt anti-clockwise. I forgot to mention, the intercooler is bolted onto the bottom of the radiator. In order to get the radiator out of the slam panel, you've got to undo these E10 bolts. They go all the way through. I've lost my finger. They go all the way through into a nut on the other side, and there's one on that corner as well. And then there's a slot in this one for adjustment. This one is covered by the receiver dryer. So by unclipping the condenser here and then moving it up slightly in its bracket, you can undo this one. And before you unclip the condenser, you can undo this one. So it's a juggling exercise, and you do need to slide the condenser up a few mil to undo them all. And then the condenser and the radiator come out as one piece out of the slam panel, and then you can separate them just by, as I mentioned, just by undoing these two clips. It might be possible to get the radiator and the condenser out of the slam panel in situ if you can get the shroud, the fan shroud, forward enough, far enough that you can get something down to undo that dirty, great, horrible screw. But when you think about it, that fan shroud's only going to be about, you're going to have maybe 2 inches or so gap between the top of the fan shroud and the radiator, and you've got to be able to get in there, well, not only with a holding tool but also with a decent Allen key and a bloody long bar. It's definitely doable. I've seen videos where people have done it, but this thing was so damn tight, you know, I had to work at it, and I'm glad I had proper front access, because it's too easy to slip and damage the radiator. Quick zoom in at where the belt goes. Up there, around there, down there, up to the power steering pump, out the power steering pump, around the bottom of the alternator, up over the pulley, down to the compressor, up over another pulley, and back round the crankshaft. Sometimes things don't quite go as expected. In order to get this bracket off and the tensioner, I need to remove that. That's supposed to be done up to 30 Newton meters. I've been at it for quite a while and I cannot shift it. I may have to destroy the pulley to get it off, but there's a bolt there, and there's a bolt just there. And you have to take the bracket off to get the cover off. Whereas the thing I thought I'd have trouble with, the crankshaft bolt, I bought the really cheap, cheerful kit from eBay, you know, the locking kit, and this is part of it. And then I bought a 1/2 inch breaker bar there, which is resting on the chassis member. Undoing that, you know, it was tight, but it was not hard work with a decent length 1/2 inch breaker and a 27mm socket. But that bloody 40 Torx 40 spline there, that's not shifting at all. It's super tight. And I've just realised in order to get these two pulleys off I need some spline bits as well, which I don't have, so I'm going to have to buy some of those. The next day, and Karen went to her craft workshop this morning, and I sent her off to Tool Station to buy this Minotaur hex bit set. and it's got short and long M10, M12 spline bits, and decent sized T40 bits as well, plus half-inch adapters, 3/8 inch adapters. There's a half-inch adapter there, and there's a M10 rather spline bit. So I managed to remove the offending pulley. It was still tight as anything, but it was Loctited, and I was getting close to cutting the thing out, but fortunately I got it all undone. And then the other two pulleys were in those bolt holes there and there. They used the spline bit and they were tight, but you know, the tool made it very much easier to remove. Right, I'm now taking the crankshaft pulley off. You'll notice I've got the timing cover off. I didn't think you could actually get the top half of the cover off until you got this metal plate out of the way, but there it is down there. The belt itself, it's in very good condition. Doesn't tell me anything really. There's an I&A part number on there. I don't know if that's a VW stand, but my gut feeling now is they have changed at some point in time. I just don't, well, from an age perspective it needs doing again anyway, but I do hope they hadn't just done it before I bought the thing and I'm making life unnecessary for myself. I mean, it all looks very clean. Water pump's been replaced. But there you go, I'm doing it anyway. Now, this crankshaft pulley, in the previous, earlier on in the video, I showed the hold down tool in place so I could undo this thing here, this dirty great bolt. That's now loose, but the tool itself gets in the way of these 4 M10 spline screws. And the Gates kit I bought, the Gates timing kit, there are replacement screws for those, so these are throwaway anyway. So, if you take the cover off of the damper, you'll see these little mushrooms. They're actually indicators to show if the rubber element of the damper is beginning to fail. If there's any wear damage on this paint or any damage on the actual mushroom and any signs of movement, because the mushroom actually allows it, as the damper operates, there's a slight oscillation, but if the rubber in the damper fails completely, over time you'll get a rattling, almost like a clattering noise, as these pins begin to hit these stops, because obviously these are here to stop the thing completely flying apart. But this is all nice and clean. But the good thing about this is you can use a highly calibrated bit of wood, 18 inches long, wedged in down there, resting up against the mushroom, and that gives you a nice stop to work against in order to undo those 4 screws. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm just about to drop this crankshaft pulley off, and then I can get this other cover off, and then rotate the engine to get the timing marks in place. And there is, on this one, somebody's done a bit of black paint there. It lines up with that little notch up there. And looking at this one, there's a little bit of black paint there, right there, and somebody's done so it's definitely been done before. Just wish I knew when. And then I will video later on, but in the depth of the engine, let's just, front, right, at the back, right, where's my finger? Right back there is an 18mm headed bolt or screw, and I will actually light it up when I come to remove it, but that's where the location is of the crankshaft locking pin access hole. And stare at this tiny little screen in bright sunlight. There it is, that shiny head nut there. That is the location of the cap for the locking pin. And I'll just move out so that you can see I'm on the right hand side of the engine. Took me ages to fathom out where it was. I couldn't see it initially until I got the torch out. Now I'm filming this out of sequence because I've already had this pulley off. So, a useful hint is that position there, which is, if you want to look at it like that, 2 o'clock or 7 o'clock. That's top dead centre in relation to an imaginary mark there, for example. And obviously this crankshaft would rotate twice in order to get the top pulley to line up with the timing marks. Obviously it's roughly a 2-to-1 ratio between the two pulleys, so the next time this rotates back to that position there, this pulley is aligned with the camshaft position sensor. And where is my torch? There it is. The locking pin is fully pushed in, and it's in the hole in the crankshaft that aligns with top dead centre. So it just so happens, as I said, that you get a rough indication on this pulley as well, or you can memorise the fact that it's at from a clock face point of view, it's at 7 o'clock. This pulley isn't absolutely spot on. I'm not going to make the slightest attempt to dismantle the top of the engine and check it with little shims to see how the cam's lined up, because the engine runs. But it's not absolutely spot on, and I'm not really bothered by it. And I've turned the engine over many times, and I have not been able to get that black mark lined up with that black mark there. I suspect if I turn it over, and it's quite knackering to do so, if I turn it over many times, the difference between the two gear ratios will eventually end up with that down there, but I can't be asked. And right now I'm happy with the fact that it's pretty much a straight line, and I will actually put some more markings on this anyway, but it visually is a straight line between them, and it may even be that's how whoever marked it up. But you should never go by the pit time marks. It's the belt position in relation to all the pulleys that matter, not the fact that other people have been in there ahead of you and tip-exed or anything else. I will be marking this belt up before I take it off. It's a Gates belt. You can still see read the writing, which and that's a normal indication. If the writing's still on the belt, it's not that old, because over time it gets worn off as it goes around the where's my finger gone? Around the various pulleys and things. It's been done at some point in time, probably at 80,000 miles when it was due. I decided to actually turn the engine over using the tool made for the job, this thing. I did experiment thinking I'd be able to get away with just using a dirty grate spacer on the centre nut and tightening up and turning it, but it didn't feel right. It didn't feel right at all using a socket on the end there. The nuts just continue to tighten, and obviously the way the pulley's designed, it's these 4 bolts are actually transferring the rotation force through. And obviously normally you're not actually turning the engine over with a pulley, it's the other way around. These 4 bolts are only really taking the force necessary to drive the auxiliary belt around. But I'm relying on those 4 bolts, and this tool that I've bought, this holding tool, allowed me to turn the engine over slowly against the compression many times until I got the hang of where top dead centre was in relation to that mark there. And I said I was expecting at some point in time to be able to get that black line lined up with down there, but I've lost the will to live. It's too damn hot, I can't be bothered. And I'm just going to settle for where it is now and then mark up the belt myself before I take it off. There's a little teeny weeny peg on exactly on the opposite side of this. There's a pin through there, and that actually locates in a hole in the actual crankshaft sprocket. But the main rotation forces are taken up by these 4 screws, and I just thought it'd be easy to put it all together, turn the engine over with the holding tool, which worked very well, and that enabled me to rotate the engine to get it to top dead centre. And it just so happens that this pin at 7 o'clock is very close to top dead centre. It's close enough that you can stick a screwdriver in and just verify you actually have hit the hole in the crankshaft before pushing this pin in. And you can see the pin goes fully in, right up against the crankcase itself. You do have to wiggle the crankshaft left and right slightly, jiggle it very slightly just to get perfect alignment, but the pin must go fully in, and then it's properly located and locked. I've rotated this engine clockwise with the tool maybe a dozen times. in the vain attempt to get that at top dead centre, with that pulley lined up with the time mark, and this mark here lined up with there, because I'm assuming that when this was done previously, that's how they lined up. Now I don't know what the gear ratio is between this pulley here and this pulley here. Obviously the ratio between that pulley there and that one there is 1 to 2, 2 to 1, 2 to 1. This turns twice for one rotation of this, so one rotation of that, pulley's there, second rotation of the crank is down at the camshaft position centre. And if I could be bothered to count the teeth on there in relation to there, I could probably work out that eventually after a few 100,000 turns I might end up with that one, that pointer there, down there. I don't know, and I can't be bothered to turn the engine over that many times because I'm exhausted and puffed out and not interested. So that was my method of rotating the engine, by putting the crankshaft pulley back on again temporarily, and now I shall remove it and just show you how the thing fits. There's the back side of the pulley. That recess there, that hole there, matches up with the hole that I was talking about on the other side of the pulley that sort of sits at 7 o'clock when the engine's at TDC. That hole locates over that little pin there. The pin's actually a lot smaller than the hole, so there's room for a little bit of alignment to get the 4 bolts to line up. But obviously if the pulley's fitted wrongly, it's going to be sitting skew with. So it's obviously very important that it gets lined up with that hole. And again, this little pip, as I said, with the hole on the other side of the pulley, it's roughly at 7 o'clock, and that relates to top dead centre. The bolt is a throwaway bolt. The Gates kit that I bought includes a replacement bolt. These are what they call stretch bolts. You wind it up to 160 Newton meters and then plus 180 degrees, so you're stretching it. Ditto with these 4 M10 spline screws. And interestingly, this washer here, this shim, was there. I think when this was done previously and the thing was put back together, they put their shim in the wrong place. It should, unless I misunderstand, be on the back here. Every video I've watched and the parts list, I'm going to go and check the parts list again in a minute, but I'm pretty certain that shim should be sitting there, and it simply spaces the pulley out very, very slightly. And I'm going to put it back in there. I don't see the logic in that tiny little shim and a dirty great big evil washer. So you can see it's only maybe a 10mm recess that the pulley sits into. So it just wiggled off. It was very tight, and I've cleaned off the rust and put a little bit of copper on there just to make it easier to reassemble. But I've seen people using tire levers and all sorts of things on these, and literally there's just a tiny little boss, and it literally, once you've managed to rotate it enough to get it off this pin, you can spin it off. It's only that pin really that's stopping it, and it just rocks side to side. I didn't need to use any force at all. And then there's the shield there. But I thought this entire shield all came off one piece, but it doesn't. It just sits over the top of that. So you probably can undo the bolts and lift it off. In fact, I'm pretty certain you can. You can actually, I thought you had to get the pulley out of the way, but looking at this now, you could certainly undo those bolts. But obviously, you still can't get to the pulley that matters. So, having locked up the crankshaft, and put the bolt in with a stack of washers just to stop the crankshaft pulley coming off. Tipex seems to be the tool of choice, so I just thought of double up everything. I put double marks on, and matching marks on the belt. Same up here, double marks on there. It's actually a bit awkward to see where the teeth on the belt are on this pulley here, so I just thought I'd do a double up, and actually cocked up one up. Double marks on the high pressure fuel pump pulley as well. Now, in case anyone's wondering, that is pretty bloody solid. That isn't going to move on its own accord, and even if it is, you know, you've got the alignment marks and the old belt and go back on. This on the other hand does move. So this is the one that just needs to be probably wheeled a bit to align it. The tensioner, literally back off the 30mm nut, and you can see the tensioner's moved backwards. Originally it was lined up with about there, and as you tension it with this 36mm socket here, you tension it across to that point there. But when you back it off, as you undo the nut, it unwinds, and then the belt just comes off. So next job is to take this little idler off here, and this one off here, and replace them. These don't look very old at all. It's just a shame you have to change these belts because of age. It's an identical belt, it's a Gates belt. I've clamped it up all the way around so that all the teeth are aligned on the belt. I've just got a load of woodworking clamps, but you know, household washing pegs would do exactly the same thing. And then what I've done then is I've replicated the marks that I made on the original belt on the inside, so it's easy enough to see. And then out with the Tipp-Ex, doubled the marks everywhere. Lovely mucky, yuck, messy, but that's more than enough to actually see what you need to do. And all the teeth, if you look around the way I've got it clamped up, all the teeth are in line on the new and old belt, so everything matches. So, next job, take these two pulleys off. I suspect these are going to be Loctite as well, and I'm going to Loctite them as well, might as well. So, pulleys next. The Gates kit comes with the water pump, and there's a marked difference between that and the one I've just taken off. You've got a steel impeller there, and a cast impeller there. Not saying the Gates one is better quality, but it certainly looks different. The Gates kit comes with a complete set of bolts, so new tensioner, and bolt for that, new idle pulley, new big pulley, bolt for that, 4 bolts that go in the crankshaft, and 1 spline bolt that goes in this pulley here. And it's slightly longer, only by about 5mm, but there is a difference. Getting the water pump out involves jiggling it past this cover. I think you're supposed to take this cover off, but I can't see how. You know, it's right hard up against the pulley. It's probably held in by these bolts hold the camshaft sensor in. And I'm sure if I move that, I'm going to dislodge something, because that looks like it's an offset adjustment there. So all in all, I wiggled it out past these plastic things that are obstructing it, because that's one of the bolt holes. I've also cleaned up the face of this, just scraped any muck off of it, because somebody had squirted sealant all around here. But you have to be careful putting the pump in, just to make sure I don't dislodge the O-ring. And I'm not one for unnecessary. I mean, the O-rings are designed to do a job. I don't believe in sticking sealant everywhere, but I will put a bit of lubricant on there just to try and make it easier. But there's just enough clearance. You can just about pull the pump back and out to get it out without, because obviously what you don't want to do is catch that edge there with the edge of the O-ring. That would knock it off. And what I've also done is drain the water down. Obviously you get a best side of half a gallon come out, but I've drained the water down below that lip there so that it's not all wet and mucky to work with, and then I've just let it dry while I went to lunch. So I've also cleaned up the faces. Oh, now I'm getting mucky all over it. Just make sure there's nothing, you know, no muck on the faces, otherwise the pulleys wouldn't set flush. Right, let's put things back together. The easiest way I found of holding this belt in place once it was in position was a couple of wedges there. These are just double glazing window wedges, I think, but you know, any wedge or bit of wood, the right thickness, about 5mm, just holds the belt on the bottom pulley, stops it falling off. I've used a couple of little clamps just to hold it in position on there. It doesn't fall off of there once it's all on. And I didn't fit the tensioner until I put all the belt on. That gave me some wiggle room. It gave me some slack here to just wiggle it all on and position it. And then what I did is back the tensioner off, and that's easy to show you on the old one. It's an eccentric cam. so the tensioner is in that position on the vehicle, and when the bolt is at its nearest point to the belt, it's effectively pivoting. So you can see that the entire pulley is closer to the mounting point, and it pivots around that bolt, effectively moving the pulley in and out. And there's a spring inside that detects the tension as the pulley is pushing in against the belt, and that's what sets the pointer. So the pointer then moves to the centre, or you're supposed to adjust it so it's just the right hand edge is just in line with the right hand edge of the pointer at the back, and that's what I've done. But I found I was actually able to leave the tensioner off while I put the belt on, wound it right back. That enabled me to wiggle it in place, put the bolt in, tighten the bolt up just enough so that I could adjust it, and then tighten it off. And I've got the in the kit that came with the locking pins and stuff, there's a 36mm open-ended spanner, which just makes it easy enough to hold the spanner in place once it's tensioned and lined up properly, do the bolt up. And what I did notice as I did the bolt up, the pointer did move slightly to the right, so I actually undid it and backed it off slightly and redid it. And the instructions are quite clear. You must actually back off the tensioner fully if you overshoot the mark, and then readjust. Don't go around a second time, because it can damage the spring, allegedly. I'm not quite sure of how. I've been sitting here looking at the thing trying to fathom out how the spring works in relation to the rotation, but you just back it off through effectively 180 degrees and then retension it. So that's the belt on. I shall pull my wedges out and the clips, and the next job is to put the crankshaft pulley back on again, pull the pin out from back there, rotate it through 2 rotations, watch the tensioner to make sure the tensioner remains within the range of this thing here. You can actually see it. If I twist the belt, you can see the tensioner move. You know, because that's effectively I'm increasing the pressure on the tensioner by twisting the belt. But I've got to rotate it a couple of times, make sure the tension remains the same. Obviously, make sure the marks are all as they were, and nothing's gone horribly wrong. Water pump went in relatively easily. I ended up sticking a little tiny wedge under. Where's my finger gone? Oh, I ended up sticking a little wedge under here as well, just to raise this enough, and plenty of wriggle room. In fact, I actually put the pump in and took it out and actually looked to make sure that the O-ring wasn't getting clobbered, and then whacked it in. All the bolts are done up to torque. It's only 20 Newton meters on these. Quite strange. This one's 20 Newton meters as well. Plus I put Loctite on now. This one is 10 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. So 10 Newton meters is bugger all. 90 degrees is a fair bit, and it's actually quite tight now. And that is 20 Newton meters as well. I've just rotated the engine half a dozen times, and my pointer's still spot on, lined up. So it doesn't need readjusting. So I've started to put things back together again. It's just occurred to me, I could have actually put the crankshaft bolt and the new screws in and done it all up, and then I wouldn't have to take it off again now and then put it back on later on, because I thought you couldn't get this cover off until that came off. But the car's going to prove me a lie now. It went on a moment ago. Go on, go on, go on, go on, go on, go on. There we go. It goes back on. You can just push it on. It literally just slides in from the side. It may, if you had a particularly awkward crankshaft pulley, may make it a little bit easier to get it off, because you've got a bit more wiggle room. I've just turned the engine over half a dozen times, and it's not actually a completely top dead center now because I've taken the pin out, but everything lines up except for those marks over there. I don't know how many rotations. I think I turned it over 8 times just to check that this pointer was spot on. I don't know how many times you'd have to rotate that for all those marks to come back up and then be in the same place again. I just don't know what the turn ratio is between those 3 pulleys. Probably a few dozen times. So I've just done it 8 times, and you know, I think that basically got the belt round about 1.5 twice maybe. But you'd have to rotate it many, many times for all these positions to become equal again. I don't even know whether the timing in relation to top dead centre and the camshaft has any relevance on where this is. I don't know whether this is timed or not, but obviously I've put the belt on in exactly the same place as, or rather the pulley's in exactly the same place as it was originally. Also in the gates kit was this. I looked it up last night. This is actually a diamond coated thrust washer. You're supposed to fit a new one. So that strange washer I found on the wrong side of the bolt was this. And it's supposed to be on there. I'm not sure how necessary it is, because although it's supposed to be a thrust washer, which it basically it just sort of cuts into both surfaces and stops any rotation, you've got these 4 spline bolts through here as well, preventing the thing from rotating. But seeing as these are 11 quid to buy, I checked the price of it, because the old one looked a bit manky, but I hadn't noticed this was in the box as well. So there you go, replacement thrust washer. I've just cleaned the face off with a knife blade. This had quite a lot of Loctite in there and in the holes, and it had bled out around here, so you don't want this not sitting flush with the crankshaft pulley. And I've done the same with this. I've scraped off my marks, Tipex marks, just to make sure this is absolutely flush before I put it back on. Morning everyone. Thought I'd make an early start. It's Monday the 18th of July, the hottest day the world's ever experienced, and since dinosaurs ruled the earth and all that sort of nonsense. Just done an oil change in the crafter. Yesterday I coated the oil filter housing in degreaser and cleaned everything up, because there's a lot of muck around there. And then I left the oil draining overnight and did an oil change this morning. Last night I woke up and I couldn't for the life of me remember whether I torqued up properly the tensioner after I'd spent ages messing about adjusting it. I torqued up the idler pulleys and Loctited those, but I just, in the back of my mind, I thought, did I actually torque that up or not? Now the problem is I've now put the crankshaft pulley on, and the bolts are all, the stretch bolts, they're torqued up, so if I take them apart I'll mess them up. Also these 2 pulleys here, I've Loctited those, and I thought, well, will the cover come off anyway with these in the way? And the answer is the cover does lift off. You can get it off, or at least enough so I can have a quick look. The only thing I had to do is undo the pulley and drop off the tensioner bracket over there. Now, common problem, there's no way I'm going to get a socket on that bolt head there. So what you can do is use a torque wrench and either calculate, if you use the torque wrench in parallel with whatever you're using. In this case it's an open-ended spanner, because I can't even get a ring on the end there. You either have to calculate the reduction in torque you apply, because the pivot point is there, and you end up applying more torque to that point there if your actual torque wrench is straight. Or if you do the torque wrench in the opposite direction, then you've got to increase the torque. But if you put your torque wrench at exactly 90 degrees, and I've just got a bolt and a nut put together there, so it gives me a point where I can actually connect it. But if you actually set your torque wrench up at exactly 90 degrees, and you set your torque wrench to whatever the torque needs to be, then the pivot points are the same. So by doing that, I was able to just double check that I'd torqued this nut up, and sure enough I had. So I didn't need to take it all apart, but it's just peace of mind. Oops, and he drops the spanner. But that's a very simple way of being able to torque up an inaccessible nut, as long as you can get an open-ended spanner to it, or a crow's foot spanner, or even a ring spanner. There is actually a gadget you can buy that you can bolt onto a torque wrench, bolt onto a spanner, and it's got a 1/2 inch or 3/8 inch hole in it. But an adapter with a couple of nuts and bolts of whatever size you're using works just as well. And it means that you can, as I say, you can torque things up. The important thing is to remember that the torque is only identical at 90 degrees. if the effective length of the torque wrench with the added on spanner is longer, then you end up reducing the torque, and if it's shorter you end up increasing the torque. And there's a formula you can use to calculate that. But at 90 degrees it's always the same. Some of you may have noticed I took the power steering pump reservoir right off. That's so that I could, with a foot pump and a bit of spare hose and a suitable bucket full of bark chippings to act as a catch tank, blow some air through the steering rack and just get out as much of the old fluid as possible. I've just turned the steering wheel around a few times just to free up some of the fluid, but I've got probably, I don't know, another cupful out in total. Also, you may have noticed there was a rather rusty pipe down there. These vans have this thing here. It's a steel water pipe. The big pipe, the big one, goes to the bottom of the radiator, and the other one I'm guessing is probably the hotter of the two, because all the paint flakes off, and they are known to burst, rust through and burst. So I've just cleaned this up with a wire brush and then used up what left of a can of black stone chip paint I had, just to improve it. It wasn't too bad, but it was just annoying me. But getting the thing out was a bit of a bastard. Part of the pipe lives down there, and then it goes under the engine mounting there, and then it's bolted on. There's a bolt to the right of the sump, to the left of the sump, and one at the top there. It's a real fiddle to get it through that gap underneath the compressor above the subframe. The manual says take the intercooler pipe out, which I did, and it gives you a little bit of wriggle room, but a lot of people actually say it's easier if you actually jack up the engine and remove this engine mounting. And I think if I was going to do it again, I'd probably give it a go, because it was a pig to get out, and it's going to be a pig to get back in again. But as I say, I'm just waiting for this paint to go off, then I shall stick it back in, and then I'm going to reassemble everything. I'm going to wrap this video up now. Everything works. I'm quite pleased, because obviously I've saved myself a few £100 in doing it myself. I've never done a Cambelt before. I'm having the air conditioning regassed in a few days' time by a mobile fitter, same guy that came to degas it. I ended up putting almost a full litre of power steering fluid in there. I had drained out pretty much a litre, including what I pumped out of the rack with my foot pump. And there's just on 9 litres of water in there. I filled it right up to the foot max mark a couple of times, and then left it overnight so that it drew down as the water contracted, and topped it up. So that's 50-50 antifreeze and whatever you call it, distilled water, that's the word. 9 litres of oil in the engine. Nothing really complicated about putting the front back on. I bought a spare set of clips for those there. They tend to be a bit difficult to take apart, not easy to get at, and they can snap, so they're dirt cheap, and they're literally just plastic clips going there. This bumper, I don't think it's original, I think it's aftermarket. It doesn't fit very well. It was on the van when I bought it. And then just to close off, that nail has been in this tyre. I couldn't remember which wheel it was on, but that nail's been in this tyre since I bought it nearly 4 years ago. And the tyre still holds pressure, but my next job before I get it MOT'd is to change all the brake discs. They've got quite a ridge on them, so I might as well do it. They're pretty rusty where the vehicle hasn't been driven. And as part of taking this wheel off, I'll be off to Quick Fit for... There's no point repairing it, I don't think. Nah. I think I'll probably have another tyre on there. There you go. Anyway, thanks for watching, and hopefully my attempt at a DIY Cambelt change will be useful to somebody.